listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hi, my name is Barbara Mendes-Jorge, and I'm a sustainability communications expert based in Brussels, Belgium. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Let's Talk Sustainable Business, a series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today is the first of a two-part conversation with Kozue Nishizaki, founder and sustainability strategist of Horizon Green, a sustainability consultancy supporting companies and municipalities in developing and implementing sustainable business strategies. Kozue is also a journalist specializing in sustainability and the circular economy for Harch Inc., a digital media company. Currently based in the Netherlands, Kozue's work focuses on a range of issues, including circular economy, sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and women's empowerment. This week's theme is sustainable tourism. For the next two episodes, I'll be talking to Kozue about the tourism side to her career and how she has seen the sector intersect with environmental and social issues. Tourism accounts for 10% of Europe's GDP, and greening EU tourism is one of the objectives of the European Green Deal. Tourists are increasingly worried about their impact, whether it is carbon emissions from flights or contributing to the negative effects of mass tourism, such as biodiversity loss and exacerbating income inequality. Nevertheless, it can be difficult for even the most concerned consumer to become a more sustainable tourist. For example, a Greenpeace-led study 2 years ago compared the costs of flight and train tickets on 112 routes in Europe at 9 different points in time, and they found that trains were on average twice as expensive as the flights, and on one route, London to Barcelona, the cost of taking the train was up to 30 times as much as the cost of a flight. This is due to a range of issues, including many countries charging railways VAT, energy taxes, and high tolls while exempting plane tickets from VAT, and not taxing kerosene fuel. Hotels are also an important area to prioritise on the road to net zero. According to a 2018 UN World Tourism Organization report, hotels account for about 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The hospitality industry also relies heavily on natural resources, generates large volumes of waste, and yet it is also a sector particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, such as extreme weather events, sea level rise, and changing weather patterns. So what sustainability issues should this sector be prioritising to adhere to legislation and ensure its survival? This is what I'll be discussing with Kozue, who has many years' experience in the hotel industry. She studied tourism management in Australia, started her career there, and worked in hotels, sales, and marketing for 13 years. Kozue's roles included PR manager for 4 seasons, and she eventually became a PR consultant in 2013, with a focus on sustainability. And as she started working more in this sector, she felt that hotels started taking CSR more seriously, but were not budgeting enough for it. Eventually, the tourism industry drew Kozue back, and she now works both in sales and PR, as well as a sustainability advisor. So welcome today, Kozue. I'm really looking forward to discussing everything related to sustainable tourism with you today. So I'd like to start, Kozue, by asking you a bit more detail on some of the projects you're currently working on and some of the sustainability-focused tourism projects you've had over the years. Could you tell our listeners a bit more, for example, about the Circular Hotel Leaders Group in Amsterdam that you work with?
Sure. So, hello once again, Barbara. Thank you so much for letting me join you today for this conversation. And so, as you have mentioned, I have worked in the international hotel companies for over 10 years in the rather commercial roles, and that's where I needed to make sure that the hotels, about 8,000 of them in the same group, successful commercially, and communicate the current business operations and financial performance to the owners who are investors of such real estate properties. And most recently, I have worked on a property in Amsterdam. This is where I have had a relationship. I started joining this Circular Hotel Leaders Group based in Amsterdam. Just to explain a little bit, so when I joined, I realized there was a very little effort made to take a responsibility for the environmental impacts in its operations. So that was quite a bit of a shock to me. And so there was a lot that needed to be done, and I'm only one person myself. So I definitely did not have enough resources nor network to help me with. And we even had, for example, this internal system where our engineering team was obliged to make submissions on a daily basis / monthly basis of data from water usage, energy usage, or waste management situations. It wasn't even used, even there was an obligation for us to comply. And we were paying for it, and the system was in place, and we were just not using it. It's just, to give you So it was quite
Yeah.
a surprise for me, just to say the least. So I needed to step up, and of course, that making sure that these regular submissions happen. But also, that's when I started gathering. So we call it a green team there. So we can actually make sure that the initiatives do have execution ability within the entity itself. So I invited procurement, someone from kitchen, rooms operations, marketing, engineering, who I considered the key players in the field. And of course, we had a lot of questions when it comes to how do we do this? How do we do that? So that's when I was joining on a regular basis to this circular hotels leaders group in Amsterdam. And this is the initiative where every hotel that has a green ambition, will pay one person to dedicate themselves to this. And we gather on a monthly basis, exchange ideas, knowledge, connect, and join forces to make a big step happen within Amsterdam. It was initiated and supported by the city of Amsterdam as well.
That's really interesting. Like, was it the first time that that diverse a group of people had been brought together to discuss it? Because that's often what's needed in sustainability, right? You can't just work in silos, like you were saying. If you have the management system in place, well, it needs to be implemented, and the data needs to uh, be retrieved from a lot of people. So, was that really a first that they were doing this?
Definitely. So it was the first of its kind, and it was very powerful because we can really exchange the, hands-on ideas to build on them and make the necessary progress happen. And just for example, for the engineering part, how we reduce the water usage by a certain percent, it's quite a lot of change to make. If you look at, even if it's one digit reduction, yeah, it's quite a lot, and you sort of have to leave everything up to the guests. Guests take their own shower, and they don't want to be told you can only have a 5-minute shower because they're paying for the hotel stay. So I discussed with this group of people at the Circular Hotel Leaders Group in Amsterdam and asked, hey, does anyone have an idea? And this lady, who had been part of this group for a longer time than I have been by then, told me that there's this part that you can install in every shower in the hotel, and that reduces the usage of water from the shower, though without reducing the pressure of the shower itself.
That's a really interesting practical example. So, thank you for providing it. Um, so, you've obviously worked in and with the tourism sector for a while. How have you seen attitudes towards sustainability develop throughout your career?
That's a very interesting question because in the academia, for example, managing the negative environmental impact has been, it has been long discussed. It wasn't anything new. When I was studying in 2000 and let's say 8, 7, it was already a big topic then. But when I started working as a professional, it was actually quite shocking to realize it had nothing to, the industry had nothing to do with that topic. That's what it felt like to me as a working individual, anyways. And this is back in Australia in 2011. So it's true. It was discussed, but it was more of a theory, and it wasn't really implemented as a practical protocol in the working environment. However, I do see the changes as well, especially after COVID. It did take a little while for us to realize, but the customers, the investors, even talents uh, demanded hotels to take such green initiatives, at least take responsibility for what you're causing. As you can see, everywhere over tourism has been a topic of a discussion quite often, and it is also to demand people who operating in this space to realize what you're actually causing versus what you're bringing, and try finding the right balance of the both. So yes, I do see a lot of the changes.
That is interesting that you saw the theory, but you didn't see the theory in practice for a while. I think that happens more often than not, especially in sustainability. you mentioned in the conversation we had before this recording that you help bring the topic to the table to board members. So can you expand a bit on how you do this? Because and kind of how aware are they of what they have to do or what they need to do when you bring that topic to the table?
Sure. So I did bring this topic to the boardroom table a number of times throughout my career. And an interesting thing is everyone does agree when I suggest we need to take an action, we need to do something about it because they know it is something that we have to work on, but no one dare to say something because it simply adds more work and more duties on that person's table. So when someone appears saying, hey, let's do something, and I'm happy to take what I can take, everyone supports that, everyone agrees with that. And
In theory.
exactly, in theory, but it changes, the whole dynamics changes when I tell them I am happy to take my initiative, but I need everyone's commitment in making such happen. And that's a whole different story. Because as we know, the travel industry, including the hotel businesses, there's really, well, first of all, it's a low margin, high volume business. So simply, they do not have a lot of extra resources just to take steps in this direction where that doesn't financially contribute back to the businesses immediately. Rather, it is a longer term investment and it is rather a longer term value creation, but it hurts them in a way in a shorter term because they do not have a lot of resources to juggle with to start off with. And especially after COVID, the hotels were severely hurt because no one traveled, no one needed hotel rooms, and they're still, in the last couple of years, trying to come out of it to go back to businesses as normal operations. So people still struggling to find and retain talents to work and to operate hotels even. So you can imagine the pressure that they're going through and trying to add something else that they don't have a set KPI for. You can imagine the difficulty of it. But what I think is interesting, though, that also works in our favor as well. How it is a low margin business and high volume business, they do need the financial incentives, and they're really willing to take the step if it makes sense to them financially. So integrating sustainability in the core business, it does create business cases. So waste collection fee, that's what we pay, energy bills, recruitment costs, or lost businesses simply due to the lack of climate action. These all have price tags. So if there is a business case where your action actually reduces some of these bills to pay for, that is a business case already. So that is the approach I realized was needed to take in order to push this topic further on in the boardroom tables as well as in the operations itself as well.
I think, yeah, if you work in sustainability and you're trying to convince people, it's so much about reframing, isn't it?
Maybe.
And yeah, I just to go off on a slight tangent, I'm based here in Brussels, and one of the hotels here, what they did during COVID was that they offered their hotel rooms for co-working. It was very interesting. They took all the beds out of their hotel rooms, or most of them, and you could go and rent it for I think 25 or 30 euros for the day, including drinks. And that was a really clever use of doing it because they were the only place doing it, and I think they saw a lot of business, and I think they're still in business. So yes, I think COVID definitely had to rely on people's creativity. Um, and yeah, it doesn't surprise me what you're saying of sustainability is often seen as something that requires a price tag, and that's the end of it, especially if you're a business that's more prone to short-term thinking, a sector that's more prone to that. Because yeah, one of the things that shocked me the most from our chat before this recording was that how at best unprepared and at worst indifferent the tourism industry is towards the EU sustainability legislation round the corner, including the European Sustainability Reporting Standards framework, which we've discussed. So I would say overall, what aspects of CSR do you think that hotels are embracing, and where do you think they're lagging behind and need to act on more quickly?
Sure. So there are many new policies that will be implemented or will come into effect if they haven't started yet. It is, in a way, a positive in my opinion, very positive. But even for some businesses, it's quite positive if they're already doing right things and making an effort in that. And of course, those companies or businesses that are not taking enough initiatives in this space will suffer from it because, first of all, they don't have the information to report because it is extra effort that they have to make to gather such information to start reporting. And it's simply more effort if you don't see the value in it. And so that's one thing. And another thing is that larger corporations, I think, will make it a bit easier for themselves because they have enough resources to ensure that or the reporting or their marketing effort, certain green initiatives are in place versus smaller private owned businesses and companies do suffer more because they do not have enough budget to make such information infrastructure available for themselves to establish. That's, I think, a challenge in that sense.
Oh, absolutely. And which areas do you think that hotels are more advanced in? So I imagine, for example, that on measuring water and energy use, hotels are maybe, already doing that automatically anyway. But maybe other areas such as, I don't know, biodiversity, pollution, not so much. Would you agree with that assessment? What do you see the areas that hotels are prioritizing and which are the ones that they should be prioritizing more?
Yeah, sure. So I believe it's a really good question, and it sort of goes back to whose role is what. So hotels, of course, operate to provide the best experiences possible, and that I do believe that they need to take responsibility to ensure that the environment, the nature, everything that is surrounding the business premises themselves will remain the same or not harmed. So it makes a lot of sense, but certain things are easier, like you said, water usage, energy usage. It's easier because it gives them the financial incentives to do so. Whereas if it is nature conservation, do they, in the longer run, it's going to bite their businesses. But in a shorter run, it does not, and it's harder to see what exactly is slipping out of our hands. And I do believe that that is when policymakers actually have to step in to draw the line and incentivize good practices and, in a way, penalize what we shouldn't be doing. Because that force is needed for businesses to also feel secure enough about making extra investment. It is a commitment from the government side where government, if they show that businesses feel it is a longer term commitment, that by making extra effort and investment from our side, that is going to be well valued and that is going to, in a way, benefit back to our businesses in the longer run. So that needs to go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. When we chatted before the recording, you mentioned that you found the corporate sector much more advanced on sustainability compared to the leisure sector. I think we've touched on some of the reasons why, but would you have anything to add as to why you think this is?
Yeah, of course, because larger corporate companies, mainly the publicly listed ones, they do have their shareholders, and these companies, of course, have made climate action promises in public. Most of them, by 2050, they'll go carbon neutral or as such. So to them, they have to fulfill the corporate social responsibility promises that they have made, or they're going to be in a difficult place financially because the shareholders will demand that promise to be executed. And so I have seen a drastic change, in a way, increase in the number of companies wanting global sustainability reports from the hotel companies, and also companies that ask for sustainability related questions prior to or during the price negotiation phases, especially the last few years, because they do need to have that information before they can make a selection over who to work with, which supplier to choose. And yeah, compared to this, leisure travelers still, although they do show interest in sustainability related initiatives, still the primary driver forces when it comes to decision making is still rather traditional. So that is based on location, price, brand name, or product itself. So that I see some good driving forces, but not strong enough.
Not yet. Lots of work to be done.
Exactly.
So, my final question for this part of the conversation, my feeling is that a lot of hotels get away with a lot of greenwashing. This is one of my favorite topics on the podcast. I find that sometimes hotels hide behind, for example, environmental management system certifications as proof that they're a sustainable, in inverted commas, hotel. Because most consumers, even if they care or are interested in sustainability, are not going to be aware that these certifications only apply to a tiny part of the business. So, am I correct, or is this too much of a generalization? What do you see in your day-to-day work?
Sure. So I do agree with this statement, but also I do not agree with it. It's 50-50. Let's just put it like this.
Nuance is what is needed for a discussion, so please go ahead.
Sure. So, first of all, yes, I do acknowledge and see a lot of greenwashing or uh, claims that are not backed with science facts. So let's say one reason for it is that no one knows what a green hotel should look like. How do we define that if there is no real policies or statement made by someone to ask for every hotel to participate in, and let's aim for one form of a green hotel? No one knows how that looks. So that's one thing. Another is that if you don't know what to work for, getting a certification actually does help building that foundation. Gaining a certification often requires you to, first of all, understand what you're doing currently versus where you want to go sustainability wise, and what are your main impact areas that you need to prioritize. So I do understand that gaining green certification does help them go towards the right direction, though that is only the foundation and definitely not the goal that they should be aiming for. So it is only the beginning, how to define how to get things started, but not the final destination where they should be so proud of and say that this is as far as we'll go. So this is what I think.
I think that's a really, really good point on what does a green hotel look like? Because actually, visually, creatively, that's a good point. I mean, there are some things that, you can kind of guess, ideally it's powered by 100% renewable energy. The heating and cooling systems are not going to be, very carbon intense. But you're right that actually, yeah, there isn't a template, or is there, or something, or examples that hotels can use, or, more concretely, how can existing hotels retrofit and do other things to make their hotels more sustainable? So, yes, maybe this is also an ideas problem, not just a finance and legislation problem. So that's a really good point, Kozue. Thank you. And yeah, I think when I started doing greenwashing trainings, I think the word greenwashing was invented because someone went to a hotel where they had that classic sign being like, don't use the towels, we're a sustainable hotel, so try and only use one towel, to kind of help the planet. And he was like, well, obviously that's a good action to do, but it's not the only thing. So as you say, getting a certification it's a very important part of strategizing on sustainability. But as you say, it's a foundation and it shouldn't be used as a generalization, right? It's a first step, and it doesn't mean that the journey is over. The journey's just beginning. So on that note, thank you to Kozue for joining us today. This is the first of a 2-part episode, so join us next time for part 2. And thanks to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to this podcast series and explore the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. See you next time.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.